Hi, welcome back to the Bear Make It YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to show you how I did a lot of things that I have not done before, and then turn all that stuff into a jewelry box. And here, I'm just getting prepared to do a resin pour. It's a 1/4-inch piece of MDF, and I'm just using the plastic cups here to support it, so it doesn't bow or flex. And as you can see, I'm using Total Boat 5:1 epoxy resin. You can use it for more than boats. It's just called Total Boat because it can also be used for boats. So I got 5 pumps of the resin into the cup, and then I put in the color to that before mixing in the hardener, just to make sure I had the color evenly mixed without trying to race the clock while also mixing the hardener in. And for the color, I'm using black diamond pigments. I got a sample pack of 10 of them off Amazon and then just kind of went with colors I thought would look nice. I actually asked for suggestions, and a friend of mine suggested that I try to use black and blue with some of the white to make it look like a galaxy, which is what I was trying to do, but it doesn't quite come out that way. I still really like how it came out, it just didn't come out looking like a galaxy like I was going for. So with the colors all mixed, I could start getting the base coat of the gray. This was Battleship Gray, name of the color. And it took all 3 cups. I was actually a little worried that I wouldn't have enough for the base coat, but I think I had just enough. Use the heat gun to spread it around, because it heats up the epoxy, which makes it flow a lot better. And I lost some footage there of me starting to mix the colors in. But it's really just pour some in, kind of stir it around to get the colors to kind of flow together, so it's not just like solid lines in there. There's really not a right way to do this, I don't think. It's just go nuts until you are comfortable with what it looks like. You can't take too long though, because the resin does set up after a while, which is what I've got here. This is the next day. I went and I just got all the tape off, and then covered it right back up with tape. And I'm doing this because now I'm going to cut this into pieces, and I didn't want to scratch the epoxy as I'm getting it all cut up into pieces. Here I'm just trimming it to the size I need, just trimming a little off each side. And I really kind of based this on getting the biggest space out of it I could, because I didn't want to cut too much off. But while it was curing, it did have a bug decided to fly down and land in it, so I had to be sure to cut enough off. Lucky that was just in one of the corners, so I just had to cut enough off to make sure the bug didn't end up in the final product. And here I'm just getting it measured out so I could get miters on the corners to make the box. And really I'm just using this for 3 sides of the quote-unquote box, because I didn't want to use resin on the back panel of the box, which will never be seen. So I really just make this a 3-sided box, and then I just use maple later on for the back panel. And here you can see I'm just laying it out, making sure that it folds and is the size I want. And then I need to actually cut the strip off each side that has the mitered corner on it, so I can make what will become the side doors later for the jewelry box. Again, this will make sense in a little bit. And then it's just a matter of getting these glued up, and I just used more of the same epoxy for these corner joints, because I didn't want to try wood glue and have that seep out onto the outside, whereas if I just use epoxy, it's just clear, that's easy enough, it'll blend right in. And then I just used blue tape to hold this in place, which actually didn't work as well as I thought it would, just because it pulled them too far. So instead of being a 90-degree angle, it was more like a 80-degree angle. So what it is, I just used a heat gun to heat the joint up so I could actually break it apart, and then I just used a big 4-foot level and just pushed it up against that so it had a nice 90-degree reference angle, and clamped them in place and then let them set up again, and that did the trick. So then I just grabbed my black paint to get them, grab my black paint to get them painted, get the insides painted, because I didn't want it just to be plain MDF in there. And paint, paint, paint. And then once that was done, I started laying out on what would be the front panel where the drawers would be. So, and this is also the reason I put blue tape on it, so I could do all the layout on it, and I wouldn't have to worry about, you know, trying to mark up the epoxy or mark it on the back or anything like that. I figured this I wouldn't have to sand or anything like that, I could just pull the tape off later. So where the drawers were, I just drilled a hole in each corner, and then I went through with a coping saw, which my coping saw skills are awesome, as you'll see here. And I just cut essentially from corner to corner, just big ol' connect the dots. And I think the biggest problem I had with the coping saw was I was trying to find a good way to clamp this and still be able to use the saw, and it took me a while to just throw it in this vice clamp, and then just had to keep readjusting the angle of the blade and all that, and by the end I didn't get too bad, but you can see here these cuts are by no means perfect. And even here you can see with them all done that they're just good enough, and that's what I was planning for, just cut to the inside of the line, and all I'm doing now is just setting up some straight reference surfaces, and I'm going to go through with a flush trim bit and the router and get these all cleaned up. And then you just want to be sure, if you're doing something like this, when you get to this point where you're going to be routing these out, you're routing epoxy and MDF, neither of which are fun to breathe, so just be sure to wear a mask of some sort, or respirator. But with that all done, I got the epoxy pieces pretty much taken care of, so now it was time to start cutting out the actual pieces for the inside of the case, with the drawers and whatnot. So for this I'm using maple for the bulk of it, and I'm marking here just the middle of where these drawers are, so that I can get drawer slides built into the drawers. And then it's just a matter of transferring those marks over to what will be the side panels of the cabinet. And I say cabinet here, but it's not really a cabinet. I guess it's probably technically a cabinet, but it's only like 6 inches wide, and I think it ended up being 16 inches tall, so just a small cabinet. And this I'm just cutting out a rabbet on the back of those side panels, where the back panel of the cabinet will sit. And here I'm actually redoing the marks for the drawer slides. You can see I've got the drawer done. I didn't get any footage of me making those. They're pretty simple construction, just plywood bottoms and then maple along the side, and then it's got a groove cut right down the middle of each side, and that's where it'll run through the drawer slide. And I'm remarking now where the drawer sides go on the sides, now that I have the drawers actually built, and I can get them laid out exactly where they need to be. And now I'm just cutting 5 grooves on each side panel, 1 each for 4 drawers, and then the 5th one near the top, the one that I'm cutting right now, will actually hold the bottom panel of the top compartment under where the lid flips open, which will make more sense in a bit when you see the finished product. And then I just did some sanding to get those nice and smoothed out and make sure they will accept these little drawer runners that I just glued in place and then used all the clamps to keep them there. And with that done, now I'm cutting out the drawer faces, which I'm using Granadio, I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's dark brown wood, and it smelled a little like cinnamon when I was cutting it, so that was fun. But it's got some nice kind of swirl to it, so I figured it would match up nice with the epoxy pour. And then I'm just laying out the hinges. I didn't plan ahead very well for this part, so I had to glue those maple strips onto my side panels to make somewhere for the hinge to go. And then again, because I didn't plan it out very well, I actually had to glue an extra strip onto the back panel of the jewelry box to put a hinge on that side, or to connect that hinge to that side. But with these all cut and prepped, I just used some wood glue and clamped them on there. And on this one, even the little tiny clamps got in on the action. And then it was time for something else that I have not done before, which is flocking drawers, which essentially is just painting a glue onto the inside of the drawer. That's why I got the blue tape on there to mask off the areas I didn't want. And then you take this fine suede powder and just kind of shoot it on there. Just get as much on there as you can. When you think you've got enough on there, put some more on there. You just want to be sure that you cover everything. And then I'm drilling out holes on the bottom panel, the base of the jewelry box, to accept 3D printed feet that I designed and printed out. And then it was just getting the drawer faces attached to the drawer. See, I drilled a hole through the drawer and then just partway through the drawer face so I could use the drill bit to align them up, make sure they're centered. And then I could finally get to actually assembling the whole thing, using the square to make sure that the side panels are where they need to be and lined up. And then that top panel isn't glued in, it's just floating in there, held in by all the other pieces being glued around it. And this just was a lot of checking for square, going back adjusting clamps, checking for square, back and forth like that. And then I put the drawers in just to make sure that they all fit in there with it glued up, which I had checked before. I just figured I better check one more time before the glue set up. And then to put the face on, since it's MDF, I just used glue to attach it to the sides. And then I just put the sides up there so I could make sure that it was lined up where it needed to be. And then again with all the clamps, because I wanted this to make sure it was clamped everywhere so I didn't have any gaps. And then for the side, you can see here where there's an extra piece on the side of the hinge, or between the hinge and the rest of the case. That's where I had to attach more just to get it to reach, because I goofed that up. And then I put shims in there just to keep it from closing down on the hinge while it was all clamped up. And it worked well enough. It did quite well. And then just 5-minute epoxy to put the 3D printed feet into the holes I drilled there. Just friction fit. And then the 5-minute epoxy will hold them in quite well. They might have stayed in there without the epoxy, but I'd rather be safe. And then similar on the drawer faces, drilled out a hole for 3D printed drawer pulls that I have. And then again, more 5-minute epoxy. And for the top, this is the top panel that's going to hinge open. I wanted to have a round mirror in there, so what I did, I didn't really want to take the time to build a circle cutting jig for this small of a hole, just because I was kind of pressed for time on this. So I 3D printed that circle, and then just clamped it on and used my router with the flush trim bit to route it out, after drilling a bunch out with a Forstner bit, which you can kind of see there. I lost some footage of doing that, or I didn't record it. This was a pretty rushed project. I was trying to get it done for a jewelry box contest that Woodworkers Source was doing. And what I'm doing right now is actually the day I needed to take it over there to turn it in. So I was getting down to the last minute here. And then I just gave it some time for all that 5-minute epoxy to cure, and I started removing the tape, which actually turned out to be more of a pain in the butt than I expected it to be. I mean, it all came off, but since it had been on there so long, it was stuck pretty good. But it turned out nice. I'm really happy with it. It fits jewelry. There's some of my wife's necklaces. Fit on those pegs. Those pegs 3D printed also. I didn't think I needed to buy anything if I could just have them printing while I was working on everything else. And I just went through and added some jewelry to it to make sure that it worked. I mean, it is a jewelry box after all, so it's got a whole jewelry. And then this is a few pictures of it at the jewelry box show. There were a lot of good entries. I did not win, which I was not expecting to, especially once we got there and saw what everybody else had done. But I'm really happy with how it turned out and the time that I had to do it. A lot of new things that I tried on this one, and I learned a lot. I may make another one. Haven't decided yet, but I really like the idea of using the epoxy resin pour to kind of create a different look on the outside of it. So even if I don't do another jewelry box like this, I will probably do something else with this concept. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see future videos. If you want to see what I'm up to real time, follow me on Instagram @BearMaking. You folks have a wonderful rest of your day.